everyone. This is our March Provider Forum, and we are delighted to have some representatives from Therap, one of our colleague members, who are going to talk to us about how AI is revolutionizing documentation in the IDD field. So I'm going to let Heather introduce herself, and then she can introduce our speaker.
Awesome. Yeah, this is exciting for me too, because usually when I come to your provider forum, it's for me to talk. And this time I've invited a colleague of mine who has significant knowledge and experience in a lot of different areas. But today we're going to focus on AI. So I have with us today Fayonne Johnson, who is our Associate Director of Support specifically for interoperability, which is including AI, pharmacy interfaces, APIs, and other things within the Therap modules that would allow you to have connectivity and greater visibility within your Therap systems. So I'm super excited to introduce to you guys Fayonne, who comes with us with quite a lot of experience both with Therap and in her background, which quite interestingly I think is in a nursing profession. So Faye's talents are varied and wide, and you guys are in for a treat to hear all of the cool and amazing things that are happening with AI in documentation and specifically inside of the Therap application. So, with that, for once, I get to be quiet and I will pass it on to Fayonne to share with you what she has to share today.
Thanks for that introduction, Heather. Good morning, everyone. As Heather said, my name is Fayonne Johnson. I'm the Associate Director of Interoperability here at Therap. And my goal today is to do an overview with all of you about the future of AI and specifically what that looks like in Therap and for our world in IDD and HCBS services. Before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping items that I have to go through with you all. First and foremost, this is a disclaimer statement. This indicates that everything that I'm going to share with you all today is for educational and instructional purposes only. You all need to make sure that you're taking into account any rules, regulations, or guidelines as set forth by your states and your agencies. This is our retention of rights slide. It protects our intellectual property and any Thera proprietary information. Again, my name is Fayonne Johnson, and I am one of the Therap AI team members. This is just a snapshot of some of the faces on our AI team. We have Justin Brocky, who is our COO. Jason is our Director of Data and Quality Initiatives. And then we have Karen and Will, who help with the regulatory side of things. And in some ways, Will is sort of kind of one of the brainchilds of AI and our next steps and where we're going as an organization. Our agenda for this morning is vast. There's a lot of information that I'd like to cover. And if you have questions or if there's anything that you'd like me to elaborate on, please don't hesitate to share those questions in either the chat or the question and answer section. And Heather, Dina, if there's anything pertinent that you'd like me to address as I go through these materials, please let me know and I'll be happy to do so. In general, we will be doing an overview. Oops, clicked on that a bit too quickly. We will be doing an overview of the AI strategy for Therap as it relates to the services that we provide. Talk about some of the new tools that we have, many of which are available for you to begin using now. Some are shortly going to be made available for you, and what these tools and products are going to do as it relates to your workflows and documentation. Also give you a sneak peek of what's up next. So first and foremost, we have quite a few things on the horizon, many of which are already available. They broadly fall into the categories that you see on the screen here. Being able to use AI to do things like produce summaries. We are constantly creating documentation. So no matter how you use Therap, whether that's T-logs, whether you're writing incident reports, whether you're doing ISV data or collecting medication information, there is a vast amount of information available that in some ways we're responsible for, at least peripherally, being aware of as we support the individuals in our services. With our data summarization, we can sort of parse through the noise, find the information that's most relevant or actionable, and then present that to the right set of folks. So that's what we're looking to be able to do with some of our data summarization tools. We've also introduced and have a new module called the QA Assistant. So as we're putting documentation in, summarizing it, bringing to the surface the things that need to be acted on or reviewed, we're also checking to see that the supporting documentation for these items is present or has been completed and notifying the appropriate staff when it isn't or needs to be followed up on. Because we produce lots of information and subsequently lots of reports, we want to make that information accessible. We live in a multilingual and multinational country and part of the world, and we want to make information accessible to families for whom English may not be their primary language. We are introducing the ability to translate any PDF that's generated from our system in 50 languages to start. So if you have a family that speaks Spanish or French or a different language, any documentation that's put into Therap can then be exported via the PDF translation feature. We're looking at voice agents, facial recognitions, IoT interpretation, which is tied to our sister company, Therap Connect, where you can use wearable devices such as smartwatches or sleep masks, thermometers and blood pressure cuffs to have that information automatically feed right into the individual's profile in Therap without staff having to stop what they're doing, log into the system, and record that. We're also introducing voice documentation. Think at a very high level, similar to how you might say, "Hey, Alexa, do this." You'd be able to say, "Hey, Therap, record your documentation using your voice," and then the system send that documentation to the appropriate parts of the application. Those are just some of the things that I will touch on today. Okay. So first things first, our goal is to empower you all as providers with next generation technology. We are doing this, but also taking into account all of the regulations so you don't have to, right? Using Therap, as you know, is a secure HIPAA compliant system, and the AI will be just that as well. It will live in the Therap ecosphere. It's built for human services, and the goal is to give you time back so that you can provide services for individuals in your support as opposed to spending more and more time doing documentation. In doing so, our commitment is to maintain that data privacy. We are not using your data or sharing your data or selling your data and using it with outside models or to train any outside models. And because it already lives in the Therap system and Therap ecosphere, it's accessible for your staff with very little additional training needed or additional provisioning needed as well. So, in using AI, because AI is everywhere, there are a couple of things that I want to make sure that I drive home. Many of us are familiar with things like Alexa and Siri, and more recently, things like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. And there are two key things that you need to know about these AI tools. The first is free AI is generally not something that you should be using for any kind of health related information. If you think about HIPAA, if you think about PHI, when you're using something like a generic chat GPT for which you don't have a business associate agreement, they are using your data to train their model. It's going out into the internet. It's floating around in cyberspace. You don't have any real protections. And so you shouldn't be using sort of the generic free ChatGPT, Gemini, and other generative AI tools. Those tools are great for brainstorming. Hey, my agency is getting started with AI. We don't have an AI policy. How do I write an AI policy and what do I need to take into consideration? Those are great examples of what you might use generative free AI for because there's no PHI there, there's no sensitive information. You're just kind of brainstorming for ideas, creating letters, coming up with policies. You never, ever, ever, ever should be using AI to write a case note for an individual or to draft or refine a TLOC that you might have put in, because again, you're putting protected information for the individuals that you're supporting into a free context that is in fact using that data to train its models. So AI should not be used in those contexts. If you do need to use PHI or you do need to add sort of protected or sensitive information, you should be doing that in a system like Therap, because again, our AI is in our system. It is protected. It can be used, and of course, has access to PHI. And if you are using AI in your personal life, you should always be using a paid version and paying attention to those business agreements that you are signing about how that data is going to be used. So again, we don't want to use the free chat GPT and Gemini other than for things like brainstorming. We don't want to put any sensitive information there. And when we are looking to use AI, we should be using that in closed systems like Therap, for which you do have business associate agreements and the PHI is protected. And that kind of leads into how our AI is different. We don't use, again, the generic off-the-shelf AI that you can just log into ChatGPT and start typing into. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We are using specific tools to solve specific problems within the Therap atmosphere. We're also using it in such a way that you can switch between the different tools that we have available, and it feeds into or is tied into existing modules and future modules that we have in the system. We're optimizing this and taking into account things like caseloads, super roles, who should have access to certain types of information, what information should be presented to those individuals, and then giving you the ability through your super admins and those super roles to control just how much they should be able to see and do. We are also future proofing our AI tools because if you've been using AI, you know that it has changed and is changing and it is evolving. I mean, I use AI all the time by the nature of the work that I'm doing here at Therap, but also in my personal life. And just looking at the changes from as recently as November and what we have today has been mind blowing. We're taking into account all of those things and future proofing our framework so you don't have to. So there are two ways that we use AI and sort of we host the information. We have both what we call an external module, which is what you would think of as large language modules. So your Geminis, again, your Chat GPTs, those are LLMs. They're used for creating large or analyzing large volumes of text, translation, and those summaries that we are doing. But those are secure instances that are hosted in Therap. Then we also have internal and sort of on-premise modules where we're actually building, hosting, moderating, and changing the PHI in our system. And that's the tools that are used to read the notes, to analyze the notes, and to produce some of those summaries as well. Because Therap is sort of a private company with private infrastructure, we own our equipment, we own the GPUs, we own our data centers. Again, we're not sharing or selling your information. And then we're able to fine tune the information and those data centers on premise for the workflows as needed. We can schedule things, we can update things, we own that data, we have the domain expertise, and we have 100% oversight of that information and those environments. We have enterprise grade versions. Of course, everything is HIPAA compliant, and we can scale as needed as you enter more information, as we add more AI tools into our system. This is a brief overview of our Therap AI security. I won't go into a ton of detail about this. If you have more questions specifically about how your information is protected, where it is stored, we can make available to you our security primer. If you have, again, detailed security questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and send those and we can follow up. But as you can see, everything is hosted internally behind all of our firewalls and is protected. So getting started with the tools that we do actually have available and you can start using right now. This year, we introduced a tool called the Therap QA Assistant. And what the QA Assistant does is it allows you to change the game for your staff and your managers. For direct support professionals that are out in the field, it gives them real-time prompts. It allows them to write better and more accurate daily notes without errors. And then for your managers and supervisors, It allows them to spend way less time correcting documents, and they can spend more time focusing on what really matters, which is the quality of the care that is being provided. So what QA Assistant does is it uses AI to check documentation in real time. If a staff person goes and they write a T-log and they say Johnny fell, Johnny wasn't feeling well, his skin was really warm to the touch, Johnny refused to take his medications, his temperature was 100.4, etc. Any combination of those things. The AI tool is then going to go and cross-reference the system to see, well, is there a GER for that fall that you documented? You mentioned that Johnny's temperature was 100.4. We are not seeing a vital signs entry that correlates that. Do you want to create that vital signs entry right now? It will check to see if the information is present, and if it finds it, will match and link and give you the ability to link that information to the T-log and to other supporting documentation. There is also the option to alert staff at the time that this is happening, so they're getting those notifications in real time. But if you're not necessarily comfortable with your DSPs getting alerts and follow-ups, you can choose to use just the dashboard feature from an administrative level, which shows items that have been flagged, items that need review, items that might be missing documentation. So there's kind of a two-pronged approach to how you might use that QA assistant. So again, for your DSPs, the QA Assistant provides timely prompts that reduce documentation errors and ensure that the appropriate documentation is present in the system to validate what they have said happens or what the GR was, or it prompts them to create the GR if that has not happened. And that can be per DSP, specifically for their caseload, specifically for the individual supported. If we don't necessarily want to give the DSPs alerts, but we do want to be able to track, hey, someone documented a fall. Do we have a GER for that? You can, for your QA and management level, simply assign them just the dashboard. So even though they're not the ones that are putting in the documentation, they are still getting an alert that, hey, this has been documented, but we don't have any supporting documentation, such as an incident report, a vital signs note, and so on and so forth. And they can manage that from the dashboards and create or link if needed. So again, you can use either or both of those approaches. There's also something known as a minimal context alert. In other agencies, not where you all are, not in any of the agencies that you support, sometimes staff just don't put enough information in the notes. They'll say, Johnny had a good day. Well, now with the QA assistant, we can create or rather notify what's known as a minimal context alert. There's not enough data. There isn't enough information in this note, and prompt a follow-up from that. Okay. It can also do the same thing for vital signs. So a lot of the sort of initial feedback that we get when we reach out to providers is, can you help them write better notes? Can you write the notes for them? Every day they write the exact same things, or maybe they're cutting and pasting documentation. And with AI and some of these tools that we are introducing, it'll help with that. To be clear, our current position is that we will not be writing notes or synthesizing notes for staff, but rather analyzing the documentation that they've written and prompting them when necessary to elaborate or create supporting documentation for that. Here's a screenshot of the dashboard so you can take a look and see. It'll let you know how many open or unresolved items there are, how many items have been resolved, and then you have the ability to dismiss something that might have been documented, but you don't necessarily want to take further follow-up action on. QA Assistant is currently available for T-logs, vital signs, and GRs, but will be rolled out to additional modules in the application as well. In addition to the QA Assistant, we are introducing a Fatal 5 dashboard. And I always joke that it's a little bit of a misnomer because there are more than 5 analyses on this dashboard, but Fatal 5 sounds a lot better, and people are familiar with the concept and the context. If you are new to this, the Fatal 5 are typically identified as the leading causes of preventable illness and death in the IDD, HCBS, and specialized care environment. These include incidents of aspiration, bowel obstruction and constipation, dehydration, GERD, so digestive issues, sepsis, and seizures. And what the Fatal Five dashboard aims to do is comb through the documentation in the system that your staff are entering on a daily basis, and then identifying when there are instances or potential instances of this that require follow-up. The current Fatal Five dashboard has 6 analyses. So, how many incidences, for example, of aspiration, potential bowel obstruction, dehydration, GERD, sepsis, and seizures have occurred for your caseload? And it is getting this information just based on the routine narratives that your staff are putting in or the summaries that they're recording on any given day. So staff go in, Johnny had a great day, Johnny refused to eat his meals, Johnny didn't drink his water today, and they might document that over the course of a day or 2 days. Because there are often multiple staff working with an individual, it's sometimes hard when you're reading hundreds of T-logs to kind of find a pattern that Johnny hasn't been eating much and Johnny's temperatures have been elevated and Johnny hasn't going to the bathroom. And that might be an indication that Johnny is experiencing bowel obstruction. Or Johnny, when you talk to him, sometimes takes 10 or 15. Are we seeing that now?
Now we see Fatal Five.
Screen movement? All right. Well, I'll back it up just a little bit, since it seems like y'all were seeing the QA assistant screen. So again, this is the Fatal Five. These are the items that we're looking at. Right now, there are currently 6 analyses, and that will likely expand based on feedback from users as they use this. But the idea is the dashboard is looking through the data set, your T-logs, your notes, and then it's identifying, it's comparing, and it's synthesizing and saying, hey, we might have an issue here, or we've had several episodes here that are lining up with the symptoms of, for example, bowel obstruction. I do see a couple of comments in the chat here. Just want to see if there are any questions at this time before we move on. Let's see. Okay, all right, let's keep going. Okay, so the Fatal Five dashboard right now, once activated for your agency, is going to be available in the same section right now as your T-logs. That is going to be the primary method of analysis because that's where staff are documenting what's going on. But of course, this will be expanded and we'll look at all of your health tracking modules and documentation as well. So, QA Assistant is in some ways an LLM integration. So it's Therap's, if you will, version of what you might think of as a chat GPT. It is scanning the notes, those T-logs. It's using not just keywords. So it's not necessarily looking for specific words. It is synthesizing the data and then it's scoring it to say, hey, this is a risk, or this has happened 3 times in the last month. Typically that is indicative of patterns for someone who might be experiencing, and then it will indicate what particular analysis that this maps into. We always do a look back by default of 31 days because a lot of times it's a symptom here, it's a symptom there. It doesn't necessarily all escalate in, say, a day or 2 or even 3. And then it has the ability to even do a deeper scan if it believes that there may be an issue and look back up to 3 months to see, hey, this is something that we need to focus on and may require some further action from the agency. Okay. Once an item has been identified and is presented on the dashboard, you have the ability to see the impacted individuals, the frequency of the occurrence, and then you can go in and actually see the narratives and why the system has indicated it believes that an individual may be experiencing one of these issues. So that is the Fatal Five dashboard that works as a function of the QA assistant that I previously mentioned. We're also, outside of just looking at the QA assistant and the T-logs, the GERs, and the vital signs data, introducing a summarization feature. With the summarization tool, we will be able to use, or you will be able to use our AI-powered insights to look at data that exists beyond the three modules I previously mentioned and include your case notes, where many of you are putting your service and documentation data, your ISP data, which is looking at your goals and narratives as often identified in your person-centered planning, and then also looking at T-logs because many people are using those as sort of your summaries and day-to-day reporting. Because of the frequency of documentation, there is a ton of volume. Many of you who are using Therap have it in your policies that when a staff person comes on shift, they would go into their T logs and they would look at their high level items to see what's happened since the last time they have worked or the last time that services were provided for individuals that they support. Depending on caseloads or even frequency with which staff come in for work, there could be a ton of information there, most of which is just a generic summary of the day that doesn't necessarily require follow-up or further intervention. But because I have 50 or 100 or more notes to read, it's possible that I might miss the one relevant sort of needle in the haystack because I'm going through and reading all of these notes and acknowledging them and indicating that I've reviewed them. With a summarization tool, it's going to turn that high volume documentation into a concise summary. And so you can use it to do things like summarize all of the T logs since I last came into work. I'm coming back from vacation. I've been out for a week. I have 12 people on my caseload who get 3 notes a day every day. So already I've got quite a few notes to read. The idea here is instead of having to go into each and every single one of those notes and read them and mark them as acknowledged, and we have sort of data and insights that the speed at which some people are marking these notes as acknowledged, it is not, you can't humanly read all of that quickly, right? So I'm kind of just checking a box to get it off my list so I can get to what I need to do for the individual that I'm supporting. Well, with summarization, because I'm summarizing key information instead of your routine good day, no notes, good day, nothing to report, it's less likely that I'm going to miss that incident where someone said Johnny tripped and fell, or Johnny was in the bathroom this morning and he had 3 episodes of emesis over the course of 2 days. On the flip side of that, some of the questions that have come up is, well, if I'm reading a summary, do I still have to go in and mark all of my T-logs as acknowledged? Is that more of an administrative function so that we can show that staff are aware when they come on shift of what's going on with an individual? Or is the fact that they've come in, generated a summary that's shown the date range and all of the notes included, but highlights just key information sufficient? What does that mean for our agency policies and our documentation review policies? How should this be tracked in our system? For those of you who are admins and who use our activity tracking feature, you know that every time you hit save, every time you open up a form, every time you generate something, that's tracked in our activity tracking logs, which you can go back and do an audit to see who created a form, who deleted a form, who's reviewed and acknowledged a form. When you're doing a summary, what, if anything, should that do to your T-log counts? After summaries have been generated, should you be able to change them? What if you modify the source data? What if you have staff that are reviewing the same data set, rather the same time frame for the same individuals? Should they all be presented with identical summaries? So it's lots of considerations here. And when those summaries have been generated, who can read them? Should we be able to share them? Should we be able to include them in additional reports? So those are questions that we have for you all as providers and are always interested in your insight as you start working with and through the use of the summarization feature. Some examples. You can do case note summaries, you can do T-log summaries, and you can do summaries of your goal documentation. Historically, when it came time to review a goal at the 6-month review or in getting ready for the upcoming year's person-centered planning or ISP review, you kind of went in, you ran a clinician report, you looked at your counts, how many times did they do it, how many times did they refuse, how many times were they successful, and then you kind of did your own analysis of what that meant for the individual in relation to the goal. Well, with the summarization tool, the system can do that for you. So to start, here's an example of a T-log summary. My staff are going in every day and they're documenting, hey, John Doe's done this, John Doe's done that, John Doe went to work today, John Doe participated in a particular activity. And then what the system does is it groups them into key areas of focus. So leisure and well-being, community engagement, health and wellness, incidents that might have been reported, and then it summarizes towards the end what's going on. So if you're able to read the screen, I know the text is a little small there, you can see that it breaks it down into the area, highlights the areas that have been highlighted or required additional follow-up, how many medical appointments she had, what she's working on, how many incidents where she fell, for example, and scraped her knee, and then it kind of summarizes it that says, overall, the notes demonstrate that this individual, who happens to be Brittany, is increasing her independence, her positive engagement in her activities, and her ability to self-manage her life despite lifing. So this is a great way to look at a large set of data across various staff specific to your T-logs, and then the system synthesize and present that information for you concisely. You can also do summary reports, right? When you're doing the summary reports, I do want to be clear that there is an LLM that Therap hosts that is doing this, and that there are multiple prompts available to analyze the same data. The prompts are developed by Therap to keep them a uniform, to ensure that they're of quality, and then as providers, you will have the ability to select which prompts you want to use and then assign those prompts to specific staff as well. So for example, I might only assign prompts related to Fatal 5 to my nurses, but I might do simple summaries for my program managers and the like. When you run a summary report, the system will show you all of the source data so you can actually go back to an individual note or an individual T-log, see when it was written, see when it was created, see when it was updated, and then see how the system analyzes and presents that data and links it back. So in this particular summary report, you can see that an individual is experiencing what we consider likely dehydration. And the reasoning for that is that the notes contain statements such as dehydration on December 25th, which obviously is a critical indicator, but there are also notes that describe signs of dehydration that match the pattern. For example, the individual has a fever, they had a drop in their blood pressure. And it even goes further to say, even though these individual things by themselves, isolated, don't necessarily mean dehydration, but because there's a pattern of this, right? They're not eating well, even though there's no mention of vomiting, diarrhea, and fever. No, I'm sorry, but there is a mention of fever. It's showing that, hey, all of these things combined over the course of the last 2 or 3 months is indicating this person is likely suffering from dehydration, and you may wish to revisit their diet, their fluid intake, and the like. This makes it so that you don't have to read 100 T-logs. You don't have to dig through months and months of data and potentially hundreds of T-logs. The system is able to spot the trends for you because you're reading, you're reading, you're reading, you're reading. It may not click. Wait a minute. That T-log where they said there was a fever 3 weeks ago and now they're not eating their meals anymore. Sometimes if you're not super familiar with an individual, it's hard to detect changes, but the AI tool can do that and ensure objective, consistent reporting across your entire agency. Okay. So, as I mentioned, there are a couple of key things to note. We are creating and maintaining and updating the prompt library. This is done from a Therap perspective to ensure quality and accurate prompts, but we do give you flexibility to decide which ones you want to use and which ones you want to assign to particular staff. You can create reports with flexible date ranges. Right now, the cap is 6 months in a single report. You can run an unlimited number of reports. For example, you could split the year into 2 separate sections. Those reports are generated in real time. So you can come in, enter your date range, request the report. The system will place it in a queue, and then you can go off and do whatever work you need to, and then come back and find those completed reports for review. Those reports can then be created as PDFs, which you can then share via SCOM or export externally if you need to share with families. And then those PDFs that have been generated can then be translated into alternate languages if you need to share that with folks for whom English is not their native language as well. Okay. The really nice thing about moving to doing these notes in a system like Therap and having these AI summaries is that you get this information in real time. If I have to remember, I'm working with Johnny and I can't get to the computer and I need to come back and do this later, I might forget. I might leave out details. Delayed entries are more prone to inaccuracies and error. And so being able to put the information in the system and get it into the system quickly to be able to use for things like summaries is amazing. And we want to minimize the, if you will, ability or rather, the ability for that to happen. So I do want to talk sort of briefly about an upcoming tool that we are considering that we are referring to as voice documentation. Similar to how you might go, hey Siri, put an appointment on my calendar in a week, or hey Siri, can you remind me to buy toilet paper? We're looking to use voice documentation to have the equivalent of, hey Therap, I worked with Johnny today. Johnny performed all of his goals. His temperature was 110. And you would be able to dictate this through the Therap mobile app and have the system place the relevant information in the appropriate parts of the system. Our goal is to minimize that delay that creates the distortion, that creates the errors, and make it more likely that your staff will document what's going on in real time if all they have to do is talk to Therap and have that information feed into the system so that later on, should you so choose, you can use AI tools to do that. There will be in future webinars and sessions sort of walkthroughs of what that will look like. But I did want to touch base on that because it's great when you have the documentation, but how do we get the documentation in there without having people have to sit down, type in information, click through things when they should be providing supports and services to individuals? So I did just want to talk a little bit about that delay creating distortion and what we're looking to do to minimize that going forward into the future. I do also want to again touch base on the PDF translations that we will be using Therap Gemini to do. The idea is when you take a ISP program, when you take an ISP plan, when you take a healthcare report that you've generated from the system, or even one of the summaries that I just went through with you all, and you want to share that with mom and grandma and case managers and other people, but right now you don't necessarily have a way to do that that's meaningful to them. The PDF translation is built for human services. It is, of course, HIPAA secure because those documents will contain PHI and sensitive information. And what it does is it's translating it with just a single click into multiple different languages. So here is what that would look like. After you create the report, whether it's a T-log, whether it's, MAR report, whether it's a ISP plan or a personal focus worksheet, at the top of the PDF, prior to where you might hit print, there will be a translate button, and then there'll be a list of languages available. On the screen are the currently available languages from day one that are in our system. There are more than 50 languages available. We are open to suggestions to other languages. If you have a subset of folks or a particular dialect, that would be helpful that isn't listed here. But the idea is you do your reports the way that you always have using whichever tools and reports in our system. And as long as you can generate that report as a PDF, our system will be able to translate it into one of these languages here. And then you can present that report to family. You can even use our SDS, our secure document signing feature, if that requires a signature, and then upload that into the system as well. Okay. This to start is available right now in your case notes, in your individual plans, in your employment history. It's available for your summaries, so your T-logs, your case notes, and your ISP data, and that will be rolled out to all future PDFs that are generated in our system over the course of the upcoming year. Pause here. I see a couple of questions in the chat. Let's see. Okay. Yes, this is a fantastic question. Thanks for asking this. We have a user who has indicated that they've used ChatGPT and external sources to revise staff progress notes. ChatGPT, especially free public versions, are not HIPAA secure, put simply, because they are using the information that you are entering to train their models, to refine it, to produce responses for other people. If you think about it this way, you know how you might have a question about something and you ask ChatGPT and it gives you often a very detailed answer. That's because it's taking data that other people have entered, it's combing the internet and looking for other sources that have been shared and presenting that. And when you feed information into ChatGPT, Gemini, and again, free versions for which you are not paying and do not have a business associate agreement, that information isn't secure. If you intend to use any of those tools, they should be paid versions for which you have a BAA and are hosted inside of your work tools, resources, offices, infrastructure, or you should be using a system like Therap and using the summarization and those features to do that documentation before entering them. Okay. Voice dictation is going to be available through the phone app. At this time, I'm not sure what that will look like for the desktop version, but stay tuned for release notes as far as what that would look like. Because I do understand that some agencies, for one reason or the other, don't use mobile app or would prefer that staff did not as well. Okay. Those are the only questions that I see so far. So let's keep going and we can actually transition a little bit more into the voice agent. So that was a very timely question. So as I said, we will be introducing a voice agent. The voice agent, just like everything else in Therap, is going to be a secure and HIPAA compliant tool. The idea is as I'm working, right, I go, hey, Therap, I just did Johnny's goals with him. His temperature was 106. And I might be working with the individual as I'm doing these things. But the idea is you're using mobile so you don't have to be in front of a screen. You can actually be providing services and it's kind of listening in some ways so that you can do hands-free real-time documentation. The AI tool is then going to process that text, that audio file, if you will, and say, all right, you've talked about a temperature, that needs to go into the vital signs module. You've talked about goals, they have an ISP program that has this task, and this task. So these are the answers that need to go in for that. You've indicated that they were obviously present for services today, so we're going to check the box and mark them present for billing as well. So it's using AI to route the information to the appropriate parts of the section. And it's capturing that in real time, so I don't have to remember at the end of the day to go in and open up the vital signs form, to write the T-log, to maybe jot it on a piece of paper so that I have that information in my mind to then go enter it into the system later. The one thing that I do want to point out is that there is always going to be a verification and a validation process for this documentation before it becomes official in the system. And so the idea is, because a lot of you are using EVV and you have to show that you were where you say you were, and you were working with the individual that you said you were at the time that you were supposed to be, the way that it works is ideally you hold up the phone or the device to the individual. It does a facial scan to say, yes, this documentation belongs to Fayonne, or this documentation belongs to Heather, and Heather is here in front of me. The staff will do the same. So Fayonne is the one who is working with Heather. So we've taken our pictures and we've both validated ourselves. We have our GPS coordinates. We obviously have our timestamps. And then I can go in and I can just talk. this is what I'm doing, this is what I've done. The system is analyzing that, it's comprehending that, it's creating the documentation. And so that device effectively becomes your keyboard. You don't have to type, you don't have to point, you don't have to click. And especially if you have users who might have difficulties with technology, this may be a much easier way for them to do that documentation. And the best part is they can do the documentation in their native language as well. I can speak Spanish to it, I can speak French to it. It's going to understand what I'm saying. It's going to translate that information. To be clear, it will be stored in English in the application. But I can speak to it the way that I would naturally speak. So less is likely to get lost in translation because of language barriers. When the system creates the information, I will have the ability to view and validate it. I want to be clear, there is always going to be that human in the loop to verify it before it becomes official, but I don't have to go in and multiple sections, type in all of the information, translate the information, put it into, for example, an external source to do that. The system is going to do that for me. Okay. That just about covers all of the resources that are available in our application. It highlights sort of our roadmap. Many of these tools are available if you are a Therap user and you can begin requesting. The really nice thing is that for those of you who are using the application, all of the tools that I have mentioned are that are live and available are free of charge. There is no additional cost to begin using these features and this functionality. To be clear, none of it will be activated automatically for you. There is a formal request process that does require you to sign an AI addendum. So if you're interested, you can have your super administrator reach out to Therap via issue tracker, via live help or feedback. We will send the AI addendum to the appropriate spokesperson or super admin at your agency for review. And then you can select which of these modules you'd like to get started with and assign the roles and features to your staff. You are not required to use our AI tools, but we are making them available for you all. We encourage you to adopt it early, and more importantly, we encourage your feedback as we refine these features going forward. Share with us what's working, what you'd like to see, what would be helpful, and hopefully this has been informative for you all today. I do want to thank you for your time and open up the floor to questions.
Hey, Faye, we've got a couple of questions already in the chat. One was currently you said that voice dictation is on the phone app. Will there be a desktop version?
So it's in discussion. I can't confidently say no, there won't be. I certainly understand that there is value in having that, and many people only use the desktop version of the application. I don't know what that will look like right now because there is that visual validation of the facial recognition for both the user and the staff person documenting. So more to come.
And then the follow-up question to that is how accurate is the voice dictation?
Oh, it's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're using voice dictation in sort of your real life application. I know I disproportionately use AI again because of the work that I do, and it's pretty scarily accurate. And you can, of course, always refine. That's that human in the loop before it becomes part of the official record, where if again something was off, you'll be able to give feedback. That is true for all of our AI tools. There is a feedback button that you can say this was good or this was bad, and then you can provide an explanation because the model is learning.
And then I answered several questions in the chat personally. So if I answered directly to you, feel free to reach out to me for more information. There was a question about, do you have any feedback related to creating AI policies within, the organizations?
Yes.
Typically, we don't give policies particularly, but maybe you have some feedback you can provide around that.
Absolutely. So, yes, Heather, you are right. We won't give you specific advice about what your AI policy should look like, other than you should have an AI policy, whether or not you choose to use any of the tools in our system. Because the reality is, even if you don't have AI enabled for your agency, your staff are using it. They're writing notes and sticking it in ChatGPT. They're Googling things, they're using external sources, and you should have a policy, if nothing else, that says, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. That's outside sort of, agency policy and so on and so forth. The other thing about AI policies is a lot of people don't know where to start. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but you can use AI to write your AI policies. It'll give you a wonderful outline of considerations, what should you do, what shouldn't you do, and help you walk through that process, and then give you a fantastic initial draft that you can refine and make agency specific. So using AI to create your AI policies, which sounds odd, is a wonderful way to kind of get your feet wet.
And I would say, Faye, to that end, without getting down into personal health information or things along those lines, absolutely do be playing with those public-facing AI solutions. Get familiar, get comfortable. We were just having a sideline conversation with our person-centered thinking team about AI. The more you kind of get in there, the more you're going to realize you're already using it. You just don't know you're using it. Your staff members, as you mentioned, are already familiar. I think gone for the most part of the days when the excuse my staff can't use a computer is just not accurate. I promise you, Grandma is FaceTiming with those grandbabies. I promise you, Great Aunt Susie is buying something on Amazon or has a Netflix account, right? And even in those things, AI is a part of what's happening in your day-to-day lives. And so get familiar, try not to be afraid, but keep in mind the difference between public-facing AI and Therap AI is Therap AI lives inside that house that we've, built with you, and it's got a lock on the front door. So you just want to be mindful of that, and not, like you said, Faye, be pushing that PHI information out into unsecured large language models such as a Chat GPT or a Gemini. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. So we'll pause here, but we do appreciate your time so very much. Thank you for joining us today. And I think that about covers what we had to talk about for our session today. We appreciate everybody letting us come out and hang out with you and share some new and exciting things that they're up.
And we
Yeah.
certainly appreciate you and Faye joining as well. So we will send out a copy of the presentation to all attendees and include these ladies' contact information. And we hope everyone has a great Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.